Word association time. If I was to say Lotus to you, what image comes into your mind? For me, it'll always be James Bond 007 driving out of the sea in a white Lotus Esprit in The Spy Who Loves Me. Now, if I was to ask a younger audience what they would think, they'd probably say something like the Elise or the Evora. Now, those cars have one thing in common. They're all sports cars, and more specifically, they're lightweight sports cars. I'm here in beautiful Oslo to have a drive of a Lotus that isn't any of those. In fact, it's the exact opposite. This is the Eletre, a 2.4-tonne electric SUV that's coming to the UK later this summer with prices starting from £89,500. Obviously, a car like this poses a number of questions, the biggest of which being, has Lotus completely lost its mind? Okay, before we start, can you do me a huge favour? Can you subscribe to the channel and switch your notifications on? It will be a huge help. Okay, let's address the elephant in the room first. Why is Lotus building an SUV? Well, in case you hadn't noticed, over recent years, adding an SUV to your lineup has been a pretty well-thumbed section of the supercar makers' handbook. Porsche, Lamborghini, Aston Martin all have large SUVs at the top of their range. They sell by the truckload and generate huge profits for their manufacturer. Now, this isn't money in the bank yet for Lotus, but the success of this car could well generate enough money for the brand to build a new generation of lightweight sports cars. It's a bit like the time when Status Quo recorded Margarita Time. Sometimes you've just got to sell your soul to pay the bills. Okay, there are a lot of big details on this car, so I'm going to rattle through them as quickly as I can. 5.1 metres long, 2.2 metres wide, just over 1.6 metres high. You can make your own mind up whether you like the design or not, but there's a few bits I wanted to show you. Lotus call this porous design, which effectively means that this has ways of channeling air around the bits that get hot, like these vents here and those vents there. I mean, this thing is still the size of an Amazon warehouse, but the designers have done a fantastic job to make it as aero efficient as possible. It's also a car that doesn't photograph terribly well. When I first saw pictures of this car, I really wasn't sure about it. It's something you need to see in 3 dimensions to really appreciate the complexity of the design. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments below.
The Eletre is based on a new platform called Electric Premium Architecture and will eventually spawn a saloon and a smaller SUV. It comes with an 112 kWh battery pack that runs an 800 volt electrical system. As well as being Lotus's first all-electric car, it comes with a host of features that have never been seen on a Lotus before, including air suspension, rear-wheel steering and all-wheel drive. It also comes with intelligent anti-roll control. More on that later. The Eletre will also be the first Lotus to drive itself. Although EU regulations mean that the full LiDAR-based system isn't usable yet, it's already equipped with the sensors needed to deliver the full driving experience. For now, just the roof-mounted LiDAR camera is active and is used for the adaptive cruise control function.
Let's talk power, because this car has got an awful lot of it. The entry-level Eletre and Eletre S both have 603 brake horsepower split between both axles. If you go for the Eletre R, the range-topping one, well, that has a 603 motor just at the back and an additional motor at the front that brings the total system output to 905 brake horsepower. 905! If we're sticking with power, the equally loopy figure is the torque figure. If you go for the Eletre R, well, that comes in at 985 Newton meters of torque. Now, at a conservative estimate, that's still 200 Newton meters more than a Formula One engine produces. In here are a lot of things that won't be familiar to existing Lotus owners, like the concept of comfort and space to put things. It really is a quantum leap forward in terms of material quality and build. Now, I don't want to be seen knocking old Lotus cars because I love things like the Elise, but because they were developed for like £30, they ended up with a lot of parts of other old cars, so they never felt particularly bespoke. This, on the other hand, feels completely original. Some lovely features. There's this Alcantara trim here and the cup holders that push down like that, and you release them like that. How that's going to look after a few McDonald's chocolate milkshakes have been put on it, I don't know. But let's take some time to appreciate the wonderful art that is this steering wheel. It's full of switches, but it doesn't feel particularly busy. There's no haptic switches anywhere. You've got real metal paddles here. You've got real metal rocker switches. It just feels perfectly put together. And if I compare this to a Tesla Model X, well, it's like night and day, really. I mean, this feels like it was designed by somebody who actually likes other human beings. It feels beautifully made. Now, the seats are fantastic. They strike a really nice balance between comfort and sport They're adjustable every which way and also come with massage function, which is very pleasant. My only criticism about the driving position is, although this steering column is adjustable, it doesn't come quite far enough for me. I know I have comedy legs, but I'm not going to feel quite as comfortable as I do in some other cars. It's a modern electric car, so of course it's full of screens. There's the main one here, 15.1-inch display that runs Lotus's HyperOS operating system. Two further ones, a small display here and a small display in front of the driver. This one contains all things like speed, regen, range, and what driving mode you're in. There's also a head-up display here, which works really well. Two screens I'm not so sure on. These here for the digital mirrors. Thankfully, you can still order this car with proper glass mirrors. There's some nice touches on these digital mirrors. They're nice and easy to adjust. You can just press that and just alter the angle there and do the same on the other side. But the angle is the problem. They are quite oblique and they're quite small, so you don't get to see enough of what's behind you, and that's a bit of a problem when you're pulling out junctions and that kind of thing. So I think I'd order the glass ones. Now, all Electra models have a wonderful panoramic glass roof. It floods the cabin with light. It's beautiful, but it doesn't come with a shutter. It doesn't come with a roller blind to keep the sun out when it's particularly fierce. But Lotus has an answer for that, and you use it by the infotainment system here. If you move this here, it turns the glass more opaque or less opaque to let more sun or less sun in as you need. That's really clever.
The infotainment uses a new operating system, HyperOS, designed in-house specifically for the Electra. It's fast, easy to use, and one of the more intuitive systems that we've come across. The navigation is easy, and although some of the animations are a bit unnecessary and slow things down a little, you quickly get used to working out where everything is. The heating controls are split between physical shortcut buttons on the center console and a more in-depth menu on the screen. And don't worry, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto fans, Lotus will add this functionality later in the year. All Electras come with KEF sound systems that include a clever subwoofer built into the bottom half of the center console, and these gorgeous speakers in the door. The entry-level model gets a 1400 watt setup, with the S and R versions coming with a 2200 watt system. Both come with Dolby Atmos for a complete surround sound experience.
Back here, there is loads of space. The Electra has a 3-meter wheelbase. So that means you want leg room, knee room, shoulder room, head room, any kind of room, there's enough of it. Now this is the 4-seater layout. There will also be available a 5-seater layout, which comes with a 3-person bench along there. But this 4-seater one comes with a lot of really nice things. The first thing is you get these lovely sports seats which mirror those in the front, so you've got the same levels of adjustability, massage function, height, reach, anything, all adjustability there. You also get this lovely center console here which has things that mirror that in the front, so you get these lovely cup holders, this center console here, and you also get an extra little storage area down here as well. You also get this really natty display here, this center console, which allows you to control a lot of the things around you. You can adjust the seats, you can push the passenger seat forward with a control, you can also control the climate, the sound system. Basically you control most of the car, all the area that affects you through this. I can't think of a better place to spend some time. Okay, let's move round to the boot. 688 litres of space here, extendable to 1,532 litres if you fold the rear seats down. Now that larger figure only applies if you've ordered the car with a 3-seater bench at the back. This car has the 2 individual seats, is a 4-seater spec, so that's it. You only get 688 litres. There's a little bit of extra storage under here, but not much. A little bit for your cables and your emergency tyre kit. Plus there's a 46-litre frunk under the front. Now, because this car has air suspension, it does have a clever party trick. If this load bit sill is just a little bit too high for you, you can press this button here and the car lowers down to its lowest level. Another little party trick, if you fancy towing with your Electra, which you might want to do, if you press this button here, you get an instant tow bar. So what's this beast like to drive? Well, I'm in the Electra S, which is a mid-spec car, and it has 603 brake horsepower balanced between front and rear axles. Both the lower spec cars will do 0 to 62 miles an hour in 4.5 seconds. And if you can opt for the Electra R, well, it'll do the same test in 2.9 seconds. But perhaps the most remarkable thing is the flexibility, the fact that when you can put your foot down once you're still moving. The 50 to 75 miles per hour time, 1.9 seconds for the Eletre R. That's astonishingly quick.
The Eletre comes with 5 driving modes: range, tour, sport, off-road and track, with the last one reserved for the R model. Range and tour are the softest and most comfortable to use in everyday driving. Sport tightens up the responses by changing the damping, throttle and steering reactions. You can also fine-tune the setup by lowering the suspension even further, or you can create your own setup in individual mode.
All Eletre models have air suspension, and you really notice that when you switch between the modes. I'm in tour at the moment, and if I flick into sport mode now, well, you don't notice it, but the car actually drops a little bit, feels a lot more nailed down, close to the road, and as a result all the responses feel a little bit tighter. The other modes, if you go range, which really kind of dulls the throttle response to extend your battery life, and if you're mad enough to want to take a £90,000 sports car off-road, well, there's also an off-road mode which uses the air suspension to raise the ride height.
Lotus claims up to 373 miles of range on the WLTP cycle, which is great but not entirely as it seems. That figure was achieved with 20-inch wheels, which aren't fitted as standard to any of the models in the range. You can, however, specify 20s as a no-cost option. But given that the Eletre looks a little underwheeled even on 22-inch wheels, it's certainly not a looker.
The regen, well, that's adjustable via a left-hand paddle on the steering wheel, which is a bit confusing for me because on my Ioniq you go down one side and use the other paddle to go up. If you do that on this car you end up changing driving modes, but it's obviously something you'll get used to. The regen itself, there's 3 levels of it, but it's a little bit underwhelming for considering it's a 2.5 ton car. You would expect something a little bit stronger that would help put more power, more energy back into the battery. And I guess one of the big questions is, does it feel like a Lotus? Well, I think it's naive to expect this car to feel like an Elise or an Evora or a small sports car. But for me, there's enough Lotusness in this car to make me think, well, I'm not just driving some bland German electric SUV with a Lotus badge on it. The steering response is fantastic. It's really, really sharp around the dead ahead position. It kind of belies the fact that you're driving a 2.5 ton car. I also love the throttle response. If you think that the pedal travel is probably only that much, but you're going from 0 to 600 brake horsepower, that's been modulated really well. It doesn't feel like you're standing on a landmine every time you hit the throttle. You can really tell that this car has been signed off and developed by the same people at the same places that the sports cars have been.
Lotus's engineers are a talented bunch, but even they can't change the laws of physics. Getting a 2.5 ton car to change directions like a sports car is no easy task, but they have done a lot to try and make it feel as Lotusy as possible. The most important features are a new active anti-roll system that knows when the car is cornering and keeps it level, and also a 4-wheel steering system. This can turn the rear wheels in the circle and turn them in the same direction as the fronts to improve stability at higher speeds.
Now, as you can imagine, stopping a 2.5 ton SUV is no easy task, but the Electra's brakes certainly seem up to it. It's steel discs are standard on all the models, but you can upgrade to ceramic discs with 10-piston calipers. If you're doing a lot of track work, or if every drive you have is like the last stage of the Monte Carlo Rally, the pedal has a really nice feel. It's very well modulated, and you can always feel there's a lot of power behind the brakes. Now, the ride and handling balance seems really, really good. Our car is fitted with the active anti-roll system, and you can really feel that in long corners. The body is always being kept nice and level, and it changes directions really, really well. You're not really aware of that mass underneath you when you change direction. I think there's only one thing that I'm not quite sure, and that's the ride quality. These roads that we're on this launch, there are a few speed bumps every now and again, and you can hear the front sort of slightly crashing over the first part of the speed bumps, even at low speed. I've not really noticed it too much on potholes and things as we're going along at higher speeds, but certainly low speed, there's a little bit of noise. If there was some parallel universe where I had a choice between buying this car, BMW iX, or Tesla Model X, which would I choose? Well, I can't compare them back to back at the moment because they're not here, but from my memory banks I would say this probably feels the better all-round car. It feels sportier than a BMW iX, and it feels more polished, certainly inside and the way it drives, to a Tesla Model X. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments below. Which car would you choose?
finally, let's talk about charging. The Eletre can charge at an incredible 350 kilowatts, which is properly fast. Lotus reckons that you'll be able to top up that 112 kilowatt hour battery to 80% in around 20 minutes. That will give you around 260 miles of range in the time it takes to have a wee and a caramel latte.
What do we think of the new Lotus Eletre? Well, it's a fantastic piece of engineering, there's no doubt about it. And for me, there are enough Lotus touches in the way it looks and the way it drives to make me think it is a genuine Lotus rather than just a big old SUV with a Lotus badge tacked onto it. Now, is this the kind of car that Lotus should be building? Well, that's a slightly more difficult question to answer, but I'm enough of an old fossil to remember the absolute shellacking that Porsche got when it launched the Cayenne in 2002. Fast forward 20 years, the Cayenne is Porsche's best-selling car globally, and the Urus is Lamborghini's best-selling car globally. Big SUVs are big business, whether we like it or not. But if this car gives Lotus the budget and the know-how to develop a new generation of lightweight sports cars, that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?